Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into a really dramatic twist in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial. A juror was just dismissed, and maybe not for the reasons you would immediately think. Our mission today is to unpack the fascinating reasons behind this and what it might tell us about the jury process itself, its integrity.
Yeah, it's quite something. The core issue, this juror was removed because of several inconsistencies that came up. Basically, on his initial questionnaire, he said he lived in the Bronx, New York. But then later, talking to court staff, he mentioned he'd actually moved to New Jersey to live with his girlfriend.
Okay, wait, so Bronx on paper, New Jersey in conversation.
Exactly. And the prosecution jumped on that. They called it a lack of candor. And the judge, Judge Arun Subramanian, he saw it as a, quote, potential attempt to be deceptive. Trying to get on the jury, maybe. You see, for the court, candor is fundamental. It's not just about telling the truth. It's about being fully open during selection. Any whiff of holding back could signal bias.
Okay, right. Lack of candor. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. The defense team, Zager Donaldson, leading them, they strongly objected. I mean, really pushed back hard against dismissing this juror. Why? What was their argument against it? It seems like a residential thing, maybe minor?
Well, not minor to them. They made a couple of key points. First, Donaldson argued that these kinds of, let's say, inconsistent statements about where you live, he said that's actually pretty common among New Yorkers. People move around, situations change, maybe it wasn't meant to deceive, kind of a tri-state area reality maybe.
Okay, so contextualizing it as a New York thing, not necessarily deception. What else?
Second, and this is crucial, they argued dismissing him would be prejudicial. And when lawyers say prejudicial, they mean it would actively harm their client's chance at a fair trial. It's a serious legal claim. They felt removing this specific juror would tilt things against Combs.
Prejudicial. That's strong language. Not just unfair, but legally damaging. And I heard diversity came up too. That's often a big factor in these high-profile cases.
Oh, absolutely. Donaldson was very specific. He pointed out the juror's race. And he stated, quite dramatically apparently, that this was the most diverse jury he'd personally seen in his entire 30-year career.
30 years. Wow. So losing this juror wasn't just losing one person. It was potentially impacting that diversity significantly in their view.
Exactly. Jury diversity isn't just, nice to have. It's a legal principle. It aims for a fair cross-section of the community.
Right.
It helps guard against bias, builds public trust, especially when a case is under such a microscope like this one.
Yeah.
So losing someone who adds to that diversity, that's a blow to the defense. They even requested a mistrial if the juror was dismissed.
A mistrial request, that really underscores how important they felt this was.
Definitely. It shows they saw his presence as absolutely critical.
Okay, so you have the prosecution focused on candor, the defense arguing about prejudice and diversity, a real clash. What did Judge Subramanian decide in the end? How did he justify it?
He sided with the prosecution on this one. He dismissed the juror, and his reasoning was very direct. He said, and this is a quote, "There is nothing the juror can say at this point that can put the genie back in the bottle and repair his credibility."
Put the genie back in the bottle. So the damage to credibility was done, in the judge's view, irreparable.
That's the takeaway. For the judge, that foundational trust, the idea that the juror was completely upfront from the start, was broken. It seems like once that doubt about honesty crept in, especially about basic info given during selection, it couldn't be fixed in the context of this trial. An alternate juror replaced him.
It feels like a tough call, though. If residential shifts are common, as the defense argued, how do you distinguish between a simple inconsistency and, actual deception?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Intent is so hard to pin down. But in court, sometimes the potential effect of the inconsistency matters more than the intent behind it. It's about protecting the process. Even if the juror genuinely just made a mistake or his situation changed, that inconsistency created a doubt the judge felt was too risky for this trial. It's that tightrope walk judges have.
Right. Balancing rights and diversity against the need for an absolutely clean process. And meanwhile, the trial itself keeps moving. It's in its 6th week now.
That's right, 6th week. The prosecution expects to wrap up their case this week, actually. Then it'll be the defense's turn to call their witnesses.
So stepping back, what does this mean for you if you're following this or just interested in how the justice system works? It really throws a spotlight on trust and candor, doesn't it?
It really does. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, this whole incident highlights a fundamental tension. It's that delicate balance, between making sure a juror is credible, totally honest, and the need to maintain jury diversity, especially in these huge cases.
Yeah, you need diversity for fairness, but you also need absolute trust in what jurors tell the court.
Precisely. Efforts to get a representative jury are vital, legally protected even. But this shows how a perceived lack of honesty, even on something that might seem small like an address, can just knock a juror right out. It demonstrates that courts often have to prioritize the perceived integrity of the process, built on that transparency, even over strong diversity arguments.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe chew on. How much can one person's perceived honesty or dishonesty really sway the whole path and maybe even the public's view of justice in a massive trial like this?
Right.
It certainly makes you think about the weight on each juror's shoulders.